Welcome to the OK Now What show. I'm your host, Kate Gladden, episode 9. This is the show for people who know life doesn't happen to you, life happens, and the impact it has is up to you. Hey, beautiful people. Thanks for joining me for another episode where we have another awesome guest coming on the show. One of my favorite parts about having a podcast show is getting to connect with so many people who are also in the self-help world where their messages and tools align so much with what I believe in, but I also get to learn and be inspired so much from them also. And today's special guest, he actually reached out to me, and immediately I kind of fell in love with his story and his approach and strategies to all thing conflict resolution. So, John Ford is the guest names for today, and he is a coach and been a mediator for the last 30 years, dealing with all different kind of conflict resolution issues. And that's definitely not a job for the faint-hearted. It's a fine art and lots of strategies and skills involved in navigating conflict between people in a healthy way. And at the heart of that, as John and I discussed, really is getting better at practicing empathy. And I love what John teaches about this. And I think it's so valuable because I guess we don't all walk around going, I need more conflict resolution skills. But what we do walk around all the time thinking, I wish I could feel better understood. I wish I didn't fight with my mum so much or my boss so much, or I wish they just better understood this, or because they did this, now I'm, falling behind in my career and it's all their fault. Like relationships are the most meaningful part of our lives, and they can also be the most challenging part. And that's why it is so powerful to better develop these skills that help us better communicate, connect, collaborate, and resolve conflicts in ways where both people feel better heard, better understood, and better have their needs taken care of, which is what John and I dive into today. And make sure you check out his extra tools and resources. I popped the link in the show notes, the empathy set. I am excited to get my hands on those cards and the app and try it out for myself. But for now, let's transition into interview mode. I am very excited to bring on, I think, my first South African on the show, I believe, the wonderful John Ford. Welcome.
Thanks, Kate. Nice to be here with you.
Absolutely. Do you ever get your accent confused as an Australian? Like, do people ask if you're Australian ever?
I do, and it's funny because I constantly get people saying to me or announcing to me, "You have an accent," and then I always say back to them, "So do you." And then and then
Yeah.
I say to them, "You get three guesses," and then I test their a little bit of the geography. And the one I get the most actually is England, and then the next one I get is Australia. At which point I wince and I go, "Oh, that really hurt," because there's no team on the cricket or the rugby field that we as South Africans hate losing to more than the
Than, than
Australians.
the Aussies. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Although I don't think we're doing too good in either lately, are we? I don't think Australia's, especially in rugby, I think we need to pull our socks up with that.
I'll just say we're enjoying the way things are right now.
That's great. So you're based on the east coast of the US now, is that right?
No,
Sorry,
no,
West
I'm on
Coast.
the West Coast. I'm
Yes.
in California. Yep.
Yes. Amazing. So tell just to start with, tell my audience a little bit about your journey. Obviously, born in South Africa, kind of what
Hmm.
I know, I'm sure. Give us the Cliff Notes version, I guess,
You're
of your
right. Sure,
career so far and what ended up connecting us, because we both, I think, share a passion for similar work.
sure. So, as you say, born in South Africa, a country in turmoil, apartheid. So I was certainly aware of humans not getting along, and that troubled me. And I ended up studying law as a way of being able to engage in society in a meaningful way. But through the practice of law was really how I discovered mediation, because sadly, in the way most legal systems are set up is to resolve disputes in an adversarial way, which
Mm.
isn't really the smartest in my view. And so I just seemed naturally more inclined to mediation. And so I sort of started mediating naturally and then moved to the United States in 96 and was able to train. And sort of, as they say, the rest is sort of history. The only other little thing I would mention is where there's a lot of mediation taking on. taking place in the legal system, which is great. I was sort of inspired to get to the conflict early. So, as I like to say, I swam upstream away from the courthouse. And so my practice is really much more relational, interpersonal, as opposed to transactional, which is really what happens in the legal system. It's just much more about the money. People will reach an agreement, but they won't have actually resolved the underlying conflict. So I've been focused on that. And in that journey of working with relational conflict, the role of emotions has really come to the fore, and really understanding how key addressing the emotional energy that often really holds people or holds the conflict in place is to resolve it. So that's sort of where I've ended up. I'm still mediating, but I'm also trying to promote a more empathic approach to life. And I saw what you were up to, and that's how I reached out to you.
And I'm very glad you did. I'm excited to learn more about your work because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I think to me, if someone's like, what's the first step to resilience or becoming more resilient? Like my focus as a coach is always like, I want to try and help get this person out of blame.
Mm-hmm.
Even if something's happened to them that wasn't their fault, beyond their control, so long as we're in blame mode, pointing the finger, victim mode, no matter like, there's moments where you've got to first process through your experience, but then it's like, I've got to try and get them out of blame because that just sucks away your ability to be resilient. And I can imagine it's the same when you're trying to mediate. If someone's caught in the pointing the finger, but they did this and they don't understand. So how, like, what's that first step to get them from so like pointing the finger so much towards more empathy?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, I think that in a way, that's the nutshell question of saying, like when some things happen to someone, they've had an adverse experience in life. Um, I think again, as you're sort of pointing out, unless they've done a lot of self-reflective self-work and looked in their mirror and are composing themselves to meet life, it's going to be very easy for them to slip into that. Look what you did to me. I'm the victim. What's wrong with you? And blaming. And of course, I bet you know about that dilemma of the pointing the finger, and there are always three fingers pointing back at others. So one of the things that I do, at least this is in the context of mediation, for example, is I try to surface that. In other words, the inevitability of people wanting to blame. So I try to bring that out and then refocus folks and really inviting them to take responsibility. And I'll share one way in which I do that. So when again, this is in the mediation context, I'll point out for people to work out their differences, there needs to be some kind of acknowledgement of what happened, right? So that's an important piece of the puzzle. But another important piece of the puzzle is that empathy piece. And classic empathy is always, thinking about the experience from the other person's point of view. And I encourage people to do that, to try and put themselves in the shoe of the others. But the other piece is also the self-empathy piece. So what I do is at that point, I normally raise my hand and I sort of say, it's like, have you looked in the mirror? And have you sort of seen how you potentially are contributing to this? And normally, like, people don't necessarily want me to be leading them in that way, because they want me to be leading them in the direction of, can't you see how that other person was to blame?
Yeah.
So I sort of say, when we hold up that mirror of humanity and we sort of sometimes see our face in that, the very thing that we're accusing the other person of doing, that we do ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, normally I'm getting like the people are looking at me and they're trying to track along with me. And then I'll say something like this. I'll say, if you're struggling sort of to really sort of land this example of what I really mean, I say, my hunch is, and this could be to one person or it could be a group of people. I've done this with a group of over 70 people. I'll say to them, my hunch is you really value honesty. And I haven't encountered a human being that says, no, I don't
Yeah.
value honesty, right? They're all like, yeah, I
Yeah.
value honesty. And I say, that's great. And I say, if there's anyone in the session or that I'm speaking to, or if it's just one person, I'd say to that person, but I normally do this in a group setting. I'll say, if there's anyone in the group that has never told a lie or fudged something, please raise your hand. And what happens is the hands all stay down. So then I sort of say to them, so it's that kind of self-empathy that we're talking about, where we get off the soapbox of self-righteousness. And instead of focusing on the world out there that's at blame, we turn our inquiry towards ourselves, and we start looking at our contribution, and we try and move away from the blame conversation to the learning conversation and recognize that when something goes wrong, like a miscommunication, I can say, well, Kate, you weren't clear. And you can say, well, John, you weren't listening. Right. So when there's a miscommunication, there's two, but it's so tempting always to start off, I'm squeaky clean, you're to blame. And so it's sometimes gently guiding people, but again, it's bringing up that mirror and helping them see that as humans, we're all struggling to get along. And the sooner we get off, as I say, that soapbox of self-righteousness and just recognize our common humanity and struggle, that
Mm-hmm.
I find that sort of blame or that posture of being the victim sort of starts to drop. But the dilemma, of course, is a lot of that is hardwired into people's, neural pathways. They've had a lifetime of when something goes wrong, blaming. So it isn't easy.
Yes, that that is for sure. But it's, when I try and work with people too, it's like, but if you can show them where we're willing to take responsibility for our actions and how we're showing up and interacting with people, like we get the power back to change it. Like it's kind of good news if we can take ownership over that. And, I shared the example of with you earlier about my sister's accident. And even though there was no proper justice or investigation into the accident, and our family did feel mistreated by the police over there, but I just didn't want to carry around that bitterness. Like I think when you can show people that bitterness doesn't change the other person, it just changes you from being the kind of person you probably want to be in the world. So I really did educate myself on their beliefs. And I always try and tell, like, hey, if I'd had that person's upbringing or experiences or whatever, maybe I would have handled it in the same way. Who am I to say? I don't know. Like, so it is trying to, as you said, get off that self-righteousness while still acknowledging the real emotions, I guess, that you felt along the way, too. I don't think it's trying to like push your own pain aside, but actually do the steps to heal it and heal the misunderstanding. So I love that. I love that work. I hadn't heard that one about the finger and then the three fingers
Ah,
pointing back
oh
at
no,
you.
no,
That's a great one.
it is. Well, I don't know who I learned it from, so I can't say I was the one that thought of it. But it is a nice one, and again, it's just a helpful reminder. And then again, going on to the tragic loss of your sister and sort of, dealing with that, it is so hard. And to me, when we are in those sort of situations, trying to understand the other person's experience and where they're coming from, that's to me is again, that's that classic empathy where we're putting ourselves in the shoes of the other. What I always like reminding people is that whatever is going on, like in that horrible situation that you were dealing with loss of your sister and the police maybe not, doing it in the way you wanted them to do it, or just being insensitive in some ways, but it's getting to that place where in those sort of situations is how do we put ourselves, say, in the shoes of those, say, the Thai police officers and recognize that in any situation in life, we've always got feelings and needs about what happened. And so does that other person, even if they're not the perpetrator, like the one that say murdered your sister or however she died, but those police officers, they also have feelings and needs. So to me, one of the key things is always trying to help people to see the power of validation when we just let the person have their feelings, whatever it is, acknowledged. And that's something that I found people really struggle with because they often think, like, if I'm acknowledging my nemesis's feelings, they're going to think like I'm agreeing with them. So I found it really helpful just to keep on reminding people to say, you've got your feelings and needs, and they should be validated. But there's nothing wrong with validating the feelings and needs of the other person and trying to understand where they're coming from. It doesn't mean that you're agreeing with them. It just means that you're saying, I see you as a human having your experience, and it's like this. If it was me, it would be different, but that's your experience. But that I find to be
Mm.
super, super helpful. That just that memory of we all, whatever is happening to us at any point in time, even that person that we think is the worst ever, they have feelings and needs too. And the sooner we can get to acknowledging and validating those, the better.
What is that fine, fine line of acknowledging, validating, but not agreeing or having the person go, yeah, okay, now they're, I mean, nothing's right or it's all a matter of perspective. That's why when you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
prove who's right, who's wrong, you go in circles forever. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, do you have like a a sentence, I guess, even as a
Yeah,
mediator that you say
I
that.
was gonna, yes, exactly. So as mediators, what we'll often say is things like, from your perspective, the way you're seeing it, so that we use that sort of language to make it clear that we're not saying I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying, let me see if I understand you. What you're saying is, or where you're coming from. So I'll distance myself a little bit like that by using that you word to say, make it clear that's their feelings and needs. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that's where we're trying to weave that little needle of saying, I want to demonstrate that I've understood them, that I know what the factual content of the message is, their feelings and needs. But demonstrating understanding, as I always like to say, doesn't mean that I'm agreeing with them. So we have to be sometimes careful about our language, and we don't stray too much into that direction where someone is feeling like, oh, now you've actually taken my side. Because again, to be empathic doesn't mean that I necessarily have to agree with them. It's just to say, I can put myself in your shoes. And if I was you, and seeing the world and experiencing the world like you are, then I would end up with those feelings too. But me
Yeah.
personally, I might be having a very different experience or relationship with whatever's
Yeah.
just happened.
Yeah. It's a lot of what I teach, my coaching clients too in the opposite way when you're trying to express yourself. Like it's not like you have to, I don't know, like women particularly are kind of people pleasers and don't know how to speak up
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. So I'm more like, if something feels inappropriate or overstepping a boundary, definitely speak up about it. But I always do say like the conversation should start with, okay, so when you did X, from my perspective, how I perceived it, it felt like Y. Like
Mm-hmm.
you didn't care as
Right,
opposed to when you did that, you clearly don't care. Like sweeping assumptions of what is true for the other person is always then going to put them on the defense of like, what? No, that's not what, rather than them really hearing you. So I use those little phrases too and like trying to help the other people talk in a
right,
way that doesn't escalate the misunderstanding.
right. Well, I like that. In other words, like you're saying, from my perspective or from your perspective, just
Yeah.
clarifying whose perspective it is, just keeping that clean is a super helpful thing.
Yes, because I did see in your article, so everyone will know. Listen to the name of the an article that John wrote many years ago, but for any for
Mm.
anyone who listens to the show, they'll know I'll be all about this. From reaction to response, conflict as a choice. And so in that, I kind of did see you mention a big part of what I try and pull out and show people too is it's not directly what that person said or did. It's how you're interpreting it, the meaning you add to their actions and behavior that's really got you feeling or reacting in the way that you are. Again, that's where if we can keep highlighting it's in your perspective most, not to say that perspective isn't valid, as we're saying, but that's where we can, start introducing or nudging towards reframing it in their mind a little to see it differently, so then they handle it differently and things like that. So I love that you take that approach too. So tell me, what do most people get wrong with empathy? Like where does it get maybe misused or yeah, like goes too far, or maybe that people don't go far enough with empathy? Like I just want to hear from your perspective what you see with that.
Well, I'd say a couple of things. I think the one classic one is the empathy sympathy sort of
Yeah.
challenge. Sometimes, where um, sympathy sort of is often more about, like say you share with me something, like something tragic or difficult that's happened, and then I'm immediately saying, "Oh, it's interesting, Kate. I also," and then I go to my experience, and now I'm moving the energy away from instead of me putting it all on you and
Mm,
your experience. I'm using my common experience where I say, I've had a similar experience to you to try and connect with your experience. So that to me is the good part of sympathy. But the danger is that it ends up me drawing the energy away from a focus on you to bringing it back to me. So I would say that's the one uh, uh, big sort of danger or sort of challenge that we see in empathy is that we have good intentions, but we end up, as I say, becoming more of a focus on us. So I'd say that would be the first one, the big sort of one I was just sort of saying, being careful about that. But the other one is this dilemma that none of us have a squeaky clean lens that we're, looking at the world through. So as we're doing our best, and we might have, nothing but love and good intentions in our heart and wanting to empathize and connect with someone's experience, But if we're not aware of how our beliefs, our cognitive biases, our implicit biases, and almost just our emotional mood on the day are impacting us, our perception of that other person may be distorted, and we may be projecting things onto that other person. So they're busy sharing something, and we're thinking, oh, I know what's going on, but again, we're actually not even picking up that it's our projections that we're putting on another person. And then of course the other big one that leads from that I'd sort of say is a danger when it comes to empathy is that we end up giving advice. I think the other, in other words, so we start saying, here's what you should do, Kate, right? Because
Yeah.
I've been in that situation, and I start telling you what to do. And so that generally, I would sort of say is not really about being empathic as us giving advice. But here's another dilemma I'd also sort of see with the empathy pieces. And I think this is, we have to remember that empathy as a word, I think the first time it was coined was about 1909. So it's not to say that the concept or the idea of empathy isn't sort of as old as humanity, but it's a relatively, you could sort of say, like a new concept, a new thing that we're sort of starting to understand. And initially, I'd say the main focus on being empathic was being able to connect with the experience of the other person, what they're feeling and needing, and then in some way conveying it to them to say, my sense is, Kate, that you're feeling this and you're needing whatever it is that you're needing. And then you'd say, yeah, exactly, or you'd help clarify that. That's great. That's an important part of it. But what I think is emerging more and more is the expectation that there's some action. In other words, when we're empathic, like I'll give an example from, say, the workplace. Imagine you have a loss in the family, you go to HR, or you go to your boss first and tell your boss, I just had this loss. They say, I'm so sorry, that must be, terrible. So they're being empathic and they're showing their care. And then you say, well, I'd really like to go to the funeral on Monday. And they say no.
Mm.
So in other words, so what I'm really getting at is that when we're being empathic, it often creates an expectation of the other person that we're going to not just reflect back what they're saying, but seek to act in some kind of compassionate way, to take some kind of practical action. And so I think that's been coming more and more into focus in more recent days. In other words, is this idea of saying, don't give hollow empathy where you're just acknowledging, but people also say, like, put your money where your mouth is, like, show me that you care. It's like words are easy,
Yeah.
but demonstrate it to me in your action.
Yes, I definitely felt that was a mix. So when my sister died, I had about 3 or 4 assignments left before I was graduating university. And it was interesting the differences, like one subject, like one of my lecturers or professors, whatever, like she made me do
Mm,
my assignment like the week after it was due, while others were willing to be like, oh, we'll just give you like the
mm,
grade
mm,
average. And,
mm.
so I got a very big mix. And honestly, I was shocked, like when some of them came back and they're like, you still have to do it, just, and yeah, so it was,
That would be a good
mixed
example.
work.
That's a good example, exactly that, right? Where
Yeah.
the one that required you may have thought that they were being empathic, or they may have even said something kind and thoughtful, but you were left with that, like, okay, that's helpful, and you're not going to give me a little bit of grace and extension
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, yeah. It was rough, but I got through. I just was like, they really can't see anything bigger than that assignment in my world
Mm,
right now.
mm,
It was rough, that whole experience definitely taught me a lot. It put me on the path I'm now on, because I know I'm not alone
mm.
in things like that, like you mentioned. So let's step then. Oh, I wanted to, because empathy's whenever I'm talking specifically of empathy, I think of my husband's friend, now a friend of mine. I love him to death, but him and I see the world differently sometimes.
Mm.
He's like, empathy isn't a helpful thing. It can go too far. People just wallow in their problems. And as a coach, like, I really believe in the power of empathy. And so this is one where we had to agree to disagree. Have you had any naysayers like that? And like what's your perspective on, like, he was just like, it doesn't do anything. People just feel sorry for themselves or other people, and then what kind of thing. So
Yeah, well, and again, I think to me, what that really speaks to, and I want to be careful because I don't want to insult him, but emotional literacy. And so the thing is that as I say, as people are starting out and they're just exploring, how they relate to others' emotions and things like that, there is always that danger that if we acknowledge another human's feelings, it's going to just perpetuate that. In other words, if like, let's imagine someone's sorry and someone's sad and you say, wow, you really seem to be sad. They're afraid that if they acknowledge it, it's going to make that person more of what they are. And the
Mm,
classic, another one is always anger. Like if someone's angry and you sort of acknowledge their anger, they're afraid, like, oh, I've just acknowledged this person's anger. They're going to be more angry.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's to me is like that's the journey we've got to go along with acknowledging other people's feelings and experiment. That's what I always say to folks: to say, go out into the world and experiment. And I think what you're going to discover is actually the opposite. When we, in a genuine way, acknowledge and validate another human's experience and their feelings and their needs, we don't get an escalation. We actually get the opposite. And this ties in with the Gestalt School of Therapies, what they call their paradoxical theory of change. They say person can change when you allow them to be what they are. So when someone's angry or someone's sad and we try to say, like, what's wrong with you? It wasn't that bad, or like,
Don't
you'll
be
get
sad.
over it, you'll
Yeah.
cheer up, right? We're invalidating the person and we're actually making it worse. So again, I would just say to your husband to go, to experiment, and that's clearly been some of his life experience that when he
Don't worry, it's not my husband.
acknowledges,
It's
sorry,
it's my husband's friend. So
your husband's friend. Okay, so we
I'll
can
just let
right. Yeah,
Nate,
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
case Nate was listening, he's very
All
upset.
right.
He's very good on the scale, and I love his friend to death. He just it's just a matter of differences, and I think when you take anything to the extreme, you could prove why it wouldn't be helpful, right? And I think it's just a very extreme
Right. No, exactly.
case.
So, but again,
Yeah.
I think generally people respond well to it. And then
Hmm.
again, coming back to that theme of taking responsibility, once they've had that feeling acknowledged, then it's like, oh, okay, now I don't have to keep communicating to the world that I am sad or that I am angry.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can do something about it, take care
Yeah.
of it, take some action.
Yeah. And it stops people layering emotions too. Like I always kind of take like there's the core feeling. Um, and then if someone's like, don't be sad, like it's not a big deal, then suddenly they think, oh, I shouldn't be like I'm weak. But like so then there's like the judgment or the shame or the guilt or the confusion. And so I think, yeah, you've definitely got to acknowledge it. And I'm sure you've seen the research too, but like even just the power of labeling a feeling can help start to
Right.
diffuse it. And
That's the
so
that's the I, that's the name it to tame it.
yes, yes. I don't you
Exactly.
love all the little lingo and taglines that there's in the
Well,
self-help world.
it is. Well, I'm a fan of the name it to tame it, and the other one, which I think is super powerful, which is almost, I don't say worse than the name it to tame it, but it's feel it to heal it.
Hmm.
And that's another, because I think that's another one on that journey towards emotional intelligence and literacy is realizing it's not just identifying what we're feeling, but allowing ourselves to actually feel the emotion that we're having. So often what's happening is we're resisting it, like you're disappointed because your friend doesn't show up, for that meeting, and then you're busy telling yourself, don't feel disappointed or don't feel, irritated by their action or something like that. But if you're feeling it, the best thing that you should be doing is actually allowing yourself to have that experience, not resisting it.
Yes.
So
Have
that's
you heard
another
the
one of
one?
mine.
I can
Mm?
never say this one because it's a mouthful. But whatever you resist persists.
Persists. Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 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 What you resist persists. Exactly.
Yes. Yes. So there's lots of around
And
that because it's
another on
very
that one. While
powerful.
we're on that one, another nice one is resistance is a sign of an unmet need.
Yes. Yes.
So because
And that's a
again,
lot of where anger, I feel like anger escalate. Like they tend to say that's a secondary emotion from resisting more underlying primary emotions like fear, pain, hurt, insecurity, and all of that stuff. It's like quite vulnerable to open up and say, I felt a little insecure or hurt when you said that. So instead, I'm just going to like push that down and try and lash it out on you and get angry
mhm.
and everything. So yeah, the emotions world is a fascinating one to explore, which is why I'm glad you're doing the work that you're doing with all of that. So we'll transition a little bit to learn more about some of the awesome products that you've brought out into the world recently. And you said one was inspired particularly by a bit of a trend that you're seeing these days of like emotional avoidance. So tell us what you mean by that.
Sure. If I may, though, Kate, can I just to make a little comment about the anger one because I think that's such an important topic, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll get onto the emotional
Sure.
avoidance and how that led to the cards. But just to quickly say, yeah, so I think what you're also hinting at is that a lot of times people will feel comfortable displaying anger, but not exploring what's sometimes referred to as beneath the anger iceberg, like the sadness,
Mm-hmm.
the fear. And a lot of that, especially in terms of how the genders have been socialized, as the men are allowed to feel the anger, they can feel that.
Yeah.
But a woman, they're told no, they can't, and the men aren't meant to be feeling their sort of their sadness or their fear.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they are maybe afraid or they may be sad about something, the safe emotion to display is going to be that anger. But the other thing, I feel like I'm on a crusade to liberate anger from its demonization because it has such a bad rap and everyone sort of puts it down. And I'll just say I came from a very waspy family where displays of anger weren't encouraged, and I was really afraid of it. So part of my journey has been developing a
Mm-hmm.
comfort with it. But what I've really kind of concluded is that when people are angry, what it's telling me is that they care strongly about something and their strategy isn't working. But rather than seeing anger as a problem, I actually see it. It tells me this person's engaged, they're alive, something important's at stake to them, and they're trying to address it, and it's not working. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, it's always good, and whether it's anger, doesn't matter what emotion it is, to remember the feeling or the emotion is not the same as the behavior. So where
Mm-hmm.
anger gets the bad rap is not because of the anger and the information that it's telling you. It comes more from the way people act out. They slam doors, they yell, and at worst, there's violence. So I just wanted to
No,
just
I love
to
that. It's very
quickly throw that
powerful.
little that
I'm
that
glad
that
you
little piece
did.
in.
Yes.
But just
Yeah.
to come back to your other question about emotional avoidance, I'd say to me that's almost like a pandemic that we have where we socialize one another to not connect with our feelings. Like you'll hear people saying, like, check your emotions at the front desk, or I don't want to get emotional about this. The
Mm-hmm.
reality is we're emotional 24/7. So for me, again, I think what people benefit from, given that for many of us we've been socialized not to be in touch with our feelings, or in fact we keep getting socialized away from connecting with what's true for us. I had this experience with my bringing in or the risk of bringing in family, but some years ago, my nephew, uh, I was going to visit my sister and her husband, and my nephew wanted a car carrier. So I said, "Don't worry, I'll get it for him." And he wanted a red one, but there was only a green one online. So I got him the green one, and I took it down, and he was happy with it, but he immediately noticed that it wasn't red. And I said, "Yep, I'm sorry, that was the only one it was." So he was disappointed, and I was 100% happy that he was able to be disappointed with his uncle, and I could hold that for him also, because I also observed his joy notwithstanding that. Well, when his dad, my brother-in-law, who I love dearly, came home, he noticed the car carrier and he said, "Hey, I noticed you got the car carrier. What do you think of it?" And his son almost immediately pointed out that it wasn't the right color. And the sad thing, how difficult it is in family where you're like, "Oh, what do I say now?"
Yeah.
He felt like his son was being rude, and the next minute he was told he had to come and apologize to me. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh, right? Because now, so the poor little kid, right? He's like discovering that it's not safe to feel what he's feeling, and he's got to pretend that
Mm.
he's feeling something when he's not. So when you add all of that through your child, and now you're a grown up, it's no wonder that we're disconnected. So to me, we need tools that help us connect with what we're truly feeling and needing, and that's been what I've developed. We'll see if we can see them, but these feelings. Whoops. These are the feelings cards. See, so
Mm-hmm.
it's a pack of 56 feelings and a pack of 56 needs. And essentially, they're just cards. Like here's one that says, "I'm feeling overwhelmed," or "I'm feeling irritated." So they're really just prompts. So one way to use them is you just go through them one by one and you ask, does this feeling apply to me in this particular situation? And you discover what you're feeling and what you're needing. And you can also do it with the other person. But that to me essentially is one of the best ways of overcoming what I sort of see as this real problem in society, where people are disconnected and not in touch with their feelings. If you ask them what they're feeling, they have a very limited vocabulary, like good and bad, and not much more than that. So that's what I've been kind of trying to focus on is getting out tools that help people to get in touch with what they're feeling and needing.
I love that. What are some of the needs that you have written down as
Well,
examples of?
let's have a look. I'll just I'll I'll grab a few just randomly. So the first one says learning.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, when it was, in fact, a lot of work that I've done is in that sort of intersection where people get hurt in life. And one of the things we know when people get hurt, they want one of their needs. I don't think let's see if I have it here. No, is acknowledgement. They
Mm,
need to know why this happened to me. And they generally want, like say, imagine a hospital setting where your mom was mistreated. They'll say, and we want to make sure that you learn from this and don't do this to anyone else's mother. So learning can be a powerful need.
yeah.
Here's another one, person saying, I need community. Maybe they don't feel like they belong, they're not
Yeah.
being included, they don't feel like that. I need some space. Like you're
Mm,
crowding me. Give me a little bit of
yeah.
space. Here's another one I love when people sort of get behind this one, fun. Sorry, I'm not showing them up there,
Oh,
but this
yeah.
one says fun. That's a nice one. Here's dignity. Who doesn't, we all, I believe dignity isn't something we earn. It's a right that we're all born with. And then the final one that I randomly picked out here is transparency. So those would be just
Mhm.
some random samples. And the one thing I'll just say what I've found, which has been interesting, is how often people discover that they're needy. And I always say to them, yes, that's the human condition. We are needy, but also for those that tend in the caregiving direction, I've had any number of people that where they'll do the work with the needs, and it's more like they said, like, yeah, I knew that other people had needs, but they have this little like penny drop insight where they're right, but I have needs too. And having needs doesn't make me a narcissist or self-absorbed person. It's actually healthy. And being able to speak up for my needs and assert them and hold boundaries and make sure that my needs aren't being sort of abused or ignored is healthy. It's
Yeah.
good stuff in our life. So helping people get in touch again, as I say, with their feelings, but also their needs can be super empowering. Where they're like, "Yeah, that's exactly what I need," and
Mm,
that's a really
yeah.
powerful moment for them.
And it's also like sometimes you can't even think of what you need until you see it in front of you. Like you were like transparency or space. It's like, yes, that's it. So I think having those prompts in front of you is just going to really help give you so much more clarity than trying to think off the top of your head. If I'm asking someone how they've been feeling the last few days, I often do bring up a feelings list because they kind of look at me like, all right, I guess. I'm like, okay, we need
Right?
we need to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
better
yeah,
than that.
exactly.
So
Yeah, no,
for
exactly.
their own, and then I'm like, for each feeling, I normally get them to pick like three that they've noticed, and then it's like, okay, why? What have you know? And so it really can get deeper and deeper. So I was gonna say that's powerful, and I do think like with the needs one as well, like you're like, we're all needy.
Hmm.
That's the human condition and stuff, and
Hmm.
it's also can be a very bonding thing in a relationship because we want to feel needed as a friend, as a partner. It's like,
Right.
I want to help take care of you and your needs. Like, there's some girls I've been coaching that have, struggling at college and she didn't want to tell her friend because she's embarrassed. Like, I don't want to need
Hmm.
my friend to help me wake up in the morning or make
Hmm.
sure I'm up at my class. And now she started leaning on her friends more. I can see that she feels
Hmm.
so much more connected to them because of, she's allowing them to help. And humans want it, like I said, it gives them purpose
Yeah.
to
No,
fulfill other
exactly. Well, I
people's
was just
needs.
what you had. I was looking down because I was going through the cards because this is one that I find people often like because they want to feel like they
Mm.
matter, which is that
Mm-hmm.
sort of part of what you're speaking to is to feel
Yeah.
like I also count, I matter, you know, I also have my needs and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I love
no,
that. So just give some examples of how you've seen people put these cards into practice so far. I can see that they like work in like the workforce in companies, also like in relationships. So just give a few examples of
sure.
that.
So I'd say one way people would use them is like say, imagine you need to have a difficult conversation with someone that's important to you in your life. And you want to prepare yourself for that conversation. So instead of coming into the conversation with your prepackaged, like, here's what you need to do, in other words, the solution, and then the other
Yeah.
person comes in with that, I'd say a good place to start is to say, work through the feelings and needs cards and ask yourself, what am I feeling and needing about the situation? And that's giving yourself some self empathy where you're getting clear about what you're feeling and needing. And then also put yourself in the shoes of the other person and use the cards for that same purpose and ask yourself, if I was them, what would I be feeling and needing? So that's just a simple way in which you can prepare and then go into that conversation and give yourself a better chance of staying on what I sort of just think of as the pathway of respect and more civility, as opposed to expressing yourself, but expressing yourself like I'll give one simple little example that I sometimes use. Like when we're having a conversation with someone, we like it when we can finish what we want to say before they start talking. So imagine you've got a friend that interrupts you a lot, and now you want to let them know how that's impacting you, and you want them to change their behavior. So you could try it like this: "You're rude. You always interrupt, and you never let me finish." Right?
Hmm.
I've got the message across of how I want you to change your behavior, but chances are you're going to get defensive, like, "No, I don't, and you do too." So, right. So, but if I can connect with what am I really feeling and what am I needing, I have a chance that I can package that into some kind of I statement where I might say, I feel disappointed when I'm having a conversation and I'm not able to finish expressing myself in full because my message really matters to me too. I'd really like to be able to express myself fully. Could you please let me finish talking first before you do? So there I'm using my little bit of research of what am I feeling and what am I needing to package that into an I statement. But another way, again, it could be with that same person. If you wanted to sort of structure a little bit of a conflict resolution conversation, you could say, let's take turns and discover with the cards, discovering what we each feel and what we each need. And what I find when we do that, in other words, when we have some kind of a tool that keeps us on that same path, despite our, because so often what happens is people come trying to work out something, they have a conflict in their life. And I think the reason why we avoid conflict so much is because so often our good intentions don't translate into a result that we like, and the conversation sort of veers off the track, and people end up saying things, and then the other person reacts to that, and then it's like, oh, it just made the situation worse. I've consistently found that these feelings and needs cards help people explore and express what's going on in their world without having to demean the other person, without having to insult them,
Mm.
without having to put them down.
Keeps them out of
And
blame. So,
keeps them out of it. And I don't know if I may. I'm going to end with a final example because this wasn't the one that involved me, but there was a teacher who contacted me and she said I had a pack of the cards. I hadn't been sure how to use them. These kids came in from the lunch break, and I think there were two of them, and they were clearly unhappy. And she thought, well, let me just give them a try. And she took the two kids outside. Apparently, there'd been some kind of an argument about the lunchbox. I think the one had thrown the lunchbox, or I don't know exactly. But she said the one kid was a little bit more composed, the other one not so much. And the one that wasn't so composed, when he was going through, she said she spread out the needs cards, and when he found see if I can find it anyway. I'm not sure if I can find it here. Okay, I'm not seeing it. The card that this kid attached to was understanding, and he she said he grabbed it, and it wasn't that he was being naughty or anything like that, but he said, I want understanding, and the card ripped in half. But she said that was like a powerful moment for this little kid where he was feeling so misunderstood, and he finally had found this is what
mm,
this is what I this is what I need in my life. So to say they've been transformational in terms of my mediation practice, but they're tools that really, really help in relationships. Just help people to talk about the things that matter without, as I say, insulting, demeaning, labeling, throwing anyone under the bus.
yes, yes, I love it. I love it. I love that now my audience will be aware of this tool. So you've got the cards there, and how do people get their hands on ordering those
Well,
cards?
I want to say though, I've got the cards. I also have a little dictionary, and there's an
The
app
app.
version of the
Yes.
cards. Yeah, yeah. So
Oh, okay.
so for those, because I know I was just chatting with someone a little earlier today, and we were both agreeing, maybe a little, I'm dating myself, like I like the physical cards, but
I
I
love
know
it. I
there's a
still love
general,
physical books too. So,
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's that kind of thing. But there's a whole generation that are like physical, like,
yeah.
what do you mean physical?
What is
I'm
that?
digital. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, but the best place to get, I'd say the best place to go and check these things out is empathyset.com.
Empathyset.com. I'll make sure I throw that in the show notes for everyone as well. And can you download the app like on the app store of
Yeah,
iPhone,
yeah, yeah.
I
It's
think?
available on for iPhones and Androids. It's a
Okay.
free download. It works on a points-based system. So you're given some free points to get started. It's also designed so that you can use it for free for the rest of your life. The way you'd need to to do it that way is just to keep getting referrals. So each time you make a referral, you get points, but that way you can use it for free for the rest of your life.
Free. All right. I love it. And it's a valuable thing to be recommending. So I'll definitely check that out. That I guess I just put in like the empathy set. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, if you just type if you on yeah,
The App
empathy set,
Store.
it'll come up. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Amazing.
look for let's see if you can see, but this little whoops, that's the little icon that looks like that.
Okay. The flower there. I love
Yeah,
that. Well, thank you so much for just sharing all that those insights and wisdom. And I just love when I can get people on who I can learn from, but then also like, I don't know, that synergy and message and beliefs is always really empowering to chat with someone who, you know, it's sometimes nice to have people that see the world the same way you do.
there you go.
Although we
Hey,
need tools to navigate the world when people don't. So thank you for bringing those tools along. And yeah, if they reach out, is there any way, if people have questions or
yeah,
anything like
they
that?
can. Yeah, no, there's on the website they can reach out to me through support at Empathy Set. They can also reach out to me at john@johnford.com. But and
Yes.
they'll find me very I'm always eager to engage and hear how they're doing and how they're using the tools or whatever. I'm very open to being supportive and helpful as much as I can be.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. And I'll have to have you on again down the track. I'm sure you'll continue to be doing awesome work. So thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Kate.